Well, this is the third sermon in our series, Winning the War in Your Mind. And so the scenario is this, is that most of us in this room, we have a pretty decent life. I mean, we have a warm house. Even if you say you're freezing to death, you have a warm house. So you have a place to eat and sleep. Most of you have got a vehicle that'll get you from point A to point B. And maybe Jacob doesn't right at the moment, but yeah, Haley's got one. She will rent him. But anyway, but here's the thing. We have a pretty decent life, but most all of us who are sitting in here today, we tend to complain about our life. Do you ever think about that? You've got all that you need, but yet you still complain. And here's the thing. I don't think we've got people going to our church that are like multi-millionaires. If we do, it's not reflected in our tithes and offerings, okay? So, but here's the thing. In the United States of America, the lifestyle of the average person versus the lifestyle of somebody worth $10 or $15 million is not very different. You got a warm house, they got a warm house. You got running water, they got running water. You know, you got a cell phone, they got three. So, but here's what I'm saying. You can do just about anything you want to do. If you want to go to a professional ball game, you can do it. Some of you have. If you want to go on a cattle drive in Wyoming, you can do it. Now, somebody who's ultra rich may do it more often or may go first class, but you can do just about what they do. But even though we live in a society where, hey, there's a string up here I may trip on. So somebody catch me, okay, if I go off. But we live in a society where there's not that much difference between the way we live and people who've got $15 million live, but we still complain. Have you ever thought about that? Have you ever wondered why we still complain? Why we still have sort of a negative attitude? Well, one thing I do know, and I've already told you this twice, is that our mind is a battlefield. And most of the battles are won or lost in our mind, not in our everyday circumstances. So here's another thing I've told you. The life that you live is most of the time a reflection of the thoughts you think. Whatever comes into your mind comes out in your life. And you cannot live a positive life with a negative mind. Now, we started out this series with a scripture found in 2 Corinthians 10, verses 3 and 4. And I want to read that to you again because it pertains to what I'm going to talk about today. Here's what Paul said in verse 3. For though we live in the world, we do not wage war as the world does. The weapons we fight with are not the weapons of the world. On the contrary, they have divine power to demolish strongholds. We demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God. And we take captive every thought and make it obedient to Christ. Do we really do that? Today I want to talk to you about defeating your negative thoughts. Remember I said that every time you think a thought, it creates a neural pathway in your brain. And if you think that same thought again and again and again, then that neural pathway gets deeper and deeper and deeper, and it gets easier to think that thought. But you know, there are reasons why some of us think the way we do versus the way other people think. And one of those reasons is called cognitive biases. Cognitive biases or mental filters. Now, cognitive bias it's a mistake in reasoning based on personal experiences or preferences. Something that happened to you earlier in life, and you view everything through that lens. That's why I got in trouble with Cindy 2 Sundays ago when I was going to shoot somebody, and for telling, for saying things that would cause a kid harm. So if you grew up around abusive men, either physically or verbally or sexually, then when you view all men through that lens. Or maybe your parents told you that people who were rich were bad because they had to lie and cheat to get money and all that. And so when you get a job and a college degree and you get a good job, or you go into business, you start making money, then you start feeling guilty over making money. Because your mental filter says, bad to make money, bad to have money. So, the filters you have shape how you see life. So if you've got the wrong filter, what do you need to do? Well, you need to change your filter. You need to change your bias. We filter all kinds of things. How many of y'all take pictures with your phone? Do you? Raise your hand if you take pictures. Okay. How many of you take a selfie with your phone? Okay, we got a lot. How many of you have ever taken a selfie with your phone and say, oh my gosh, I didn't know I looked that bad? And so what do? What we got on our phone that you can fix that. It's called a filter. And I don't know how to use a filter on the phone, but if it'll make me look skinny, I'm going to learn, I'm going to learn how, okay? So here's the thing. Cognitive bias is a default filter. We're pre-wired to interpret things in a certain way. That's why two people respond differently to the same situation. You may be at work and your supervisor's told a couple of you to complete this task. And so when you get it done, the supervisor comes back in and says, hey, I appreciate y'all working hard on this. You got it done and you did a good job. But can I tell you, can I give you a couple suggestions for the next time? And one person will say, I cannot believe that they would come in here and tell us what we did wrong and they don't appreciate what we're doing, and on and on and on. But the other person would say, well, thanks for the compliment and also thank you for the feedback. It'll help us to do a better job the next time. Same thing, same supervisor, same situation, same set of facts, but two people look at it in entirely different ways. Why? Because of their filter. And we've all got one. Now, two people will come and sit down in a church service just like this. And one of them, after about 30 minutes in, they say, man, this bunch is nothing but a bunch of hypocrites. Except for me. They won't say that about me. And then they'll say the singing's awful, the preaching is terrible, I'm not coming back. And there'll be another person sitting 3 rows over that says, man, I feel the Spirit of God here. I love this place. These people want to worship God. What's the difference? Well, the difference is the filter that they're looking at or thinking through. Now, I want to give you a biblical example of this. I want you to write this scripture down and read it not while I'm preaching, but sometime today. Numbers chapter 13 and 14. In the Old Testament, The children of Israel have been traveling around for a year or two trying to make it to the promised land. They finally get to the promised land, and Moses sends 12 guys over into the promised land to look at things over. And so when they come back, they've got pods of grapes on a pole. One guy in front, one in the back, and the pods of grapes are so big they're almost dragging the ground. And so the 12 guys get back, everybody says, "What's the land like?" They said, "It is a land flowing with milk and honey." But 10 of those 12 guys said, "There are giants in the land. And this land devours the inhabitants. And we look like grasshoppers to them in our own eyes. We cannot take the land." But 2 of the guys that came back, they said, "It is a land flowing with milk and honey. There are giants in the land, but God has already given the land to us. We can take the land." Everything was the same except the filter that the guys viewed the situation through. What's your filter like? Are you negative all the time? Or are you a positive person? Do you view things through a positive lens? Now, I want to tell you, it does make a difference. God struck those 10 guys and they died. Because of their bad report and the way everybody believed the bad news instead of the good news, the children of Israel had to wander around in the wilderness for another 38 years. And every person who was 20 years old and older when they left Egypt to go to the promised land died in that wilderness. Every one of them except 2 guys. Who? Who didn't die? Joshua and Caleb. The 2 guys with the positive filter. Even Moses died without going or getting into the promised land. Now, you need to be able to look at a situation and reframe it. And reframing is simply creating a different way of looking at a situation or relationship by changing its meaning. So you can reframe something that's bad to you. I got a phone call last night about midnight, and it was Jacob. And he said, "Yep." I said, "Yeah." He said, "Well, I figured you were." And he and Haley were headed home from West Virginia, and their car broke down. And I said, "Well, do you need me to come get you?" He said, "No, Justin's already on his way." And so after we talked, we hung up, and I thought, what the heck are they doing traveling at this time of night? Now, that line of thought is from a crotchety 64-year-old guy, okay? And when I was their age, I never, ever dreamed I would be this way. Because after I thought about it for a few seconds, I reframed it. And I said, they're just like Mary Lynn and I were when we were that age. As a matter of fact, we drove the same road they were on. And we would leave Chilhowie going back to Bible college. And we wouldn't even leave Chilhowie till midnight. Same situation that it was 10 minutes earlier when he called. I just reframed it in my mind. Now, you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you frame it. So let me ask you, when you wake up, what do you think? What do you think when you wake up? Do you think it's going to be a bad day? And you can't believe, I cannot believe I've got to go to this job I hate. I do not like the people I work with. They all think they're better than everybody else, and we've got too much stuff to do. There's not enough of us to do what the owners want us to do. And this old car I got, it'll probably break down before I get there. I know I'm going to have a bad day. Is that you? Or do you wake up and say, man, I'm glad God woke me up today? And although that all of us at where I work, we don't see eye to eye, but they're competent people, and they help me get my work done, and I appreciate them. And God, I know my car doesn't look too good, it's got a lot of miles on it, but just let it get me to work and back again one more day. What's your lens? What's your filter? How do you view your life? Well, some of you went to college to be one thing and you wound up being something else. And you're thinking, here I am in this job and I'm overqualified for, and on and on and on. Or maybe you dreamed of a great marriage, you married your sweetheart, and it was good for about 6 months, and then it went south. And now you're divorced. And you're thinking, how did I get here? Or maybe you thought, by this point in my life, I thought you finished the sentence. You know, the Apostle Paul had an experience like that. He dreamed of going to Rome. He'd traveled all over the known world just about it, but he wanted to go to Rome, and he wanted to preach the gospel to all the churches that had been planted there. And he would say in his other letters, I'm going to Rome. But he didn't get there to move about and preach freely the way he had planned. As a matter of fact, when he got to Rome, he was a prisoner, chained, literally chained to a Roman soldier, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Now, Paul wrote to some other churches about his situation. And I want to read this to you in a version that you haven't heard yet, but I'm going to give you the version as soon as I read it to you, okay? Now, this is what Paul wrote to the Philippians in Philippians 1, 12 and 13. He said, now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, what has happened to me really sucks. As a result of the hell I've been through, I am quitting Life Group, and I'm never going back to church again. Now, that version is the New Whiners version of the Bible. The NWV, the New Whiners version. Now, if you're new to Christianity, that Bible really doesn't exist, but it makes for a good sermon point, okay? But here's what Paul really said in Philippians 1, 12 and 13. He said, now I want you to know, brothers and sisters, that what has happened to me has actually served to advance the gospel. As a result, it has become clear throughout the whole palace guard and to everyone else that I am in chains for Christ. Here's Paul in a prison, chained to a guard, but he frames it for good. Here we are living in the United States of America in a land flowing with milk and honey, with houses and cars and all kinds of stuff, and we want to frame it in a way to complain. Blows my mind. What most people would think is bad, Paul is framing as good. And here's the thing, they change those guards out every 8 hours. And can you imagine, as enthused about the gospel as Paul was, how many times those guards got to hear the gospel message? And so they would change them out. And Paul says in verse 14, and because of my chains, Most of the brothers and sisters have become confident in the Lord and dare all the more to proclaim the gospel without fear. Paul thought it was a good thing that he was in chains. So, I want to talk to you very quickly about reframing your story and relationships. And we'll give you 3 things you need to do very quickly. Number 1, you need to thank God for what did not happen. You need to thank God for what did not happen. Now, there was this girl, a young lady, 20 years old, went into her parents' house and said, "Hey, Mom and Dad, I need you to sit down. I got to tell you something." So they sat down, and she said, "Now, I want you just not to say anything till I get done. Just don't say anything till I get done." She said, "I went to a bar the other night, and I met a guy in the bar. And we drank too much, and I invited him back to my apartment, and here it is a few months later, and I'm pregnant." Now, before you say anything, I want to tell you this part. His probation will be over in a year. And as soon as he gets out of rehab, he's going to start looking for a job. And we're talking about getting married, but we can't afford to right now because he doesn't have a job. So he's just going to move in, and then when he gets a job, we're going to get married. And her mom and dad just sitting there with their mouth gaped open. You know, they don't know what to think. And so she leaves it for about 10 seconds. And then she says, "Actually, that did not happen. None of that happened. But I did get a D in chemistry on my exam, and I just wanted you to know it could have been a lot worse." So, you ever heard that story, Miss Russell? Thank God for what didn't happen, okay? Missed a goal at work, well, at least you didn't lose your job. One of your kids wrecked the car, but they're fine. Thank God they're fine. You can replace metal and plastic and fiberglass. Second thing, practice pre-framing. Practice pre-framing. And then you don't have to get all upset and then reframe it, okay? Practice pre-framing. Our thoughts or frames shape what we experience. So instead of making up your mind that something is going to be absolutely awful, make up your mind beforehand that it's going to be good. My wife loves to shop. I hate to shop. But I love my wife, so I will go shopping occasionally. But here's what I do. I either have a book downloaded on my phone, or I take a physical book. And if she's going to be in it, like if she goes in a clothing store, there ain't no way I'm going in there. I just drop her at the door, me being the nice husband that I am, right up at the front door. And I say, "Call me when you're coming out. I'll pull up to the front door and pick you up. Don't hurry. I've got a book. I'm good for 2 hours." I'm such a nice husband. But now what I used to do was be mad the whole time because I was doing something I didn't want to do. But now I don't care. I've got enough books to read, enough courses to study. I'm good. So you can pre-frame it however you want to in whatever situation it is. So how are you going to do it in whatever your situation is? And the third thing, first of all, thank God for what didn't happen. Second, pre-frame it and look for God's goodness. That's number 3. You always find what you're looking for. We always find what we're looking for. Now, what does a buzzard always look for? What's buzzards look for? Gross stuff, right? Dead roadkill. They like it, a little juicy, so it's not so tough to tear apart. They find it. Have you ever wondered how the heck did they find that? Well, let me ask you this: what do hummingbirds look for? They look for something sweet. And people put out these little feeders with that liquid with sugar in it, and they just swarm it. So whether you're a buzzard or a hummingbird, you find what you're looking for. Not that you're either of the two, by the way. What do you see in life? What do you want to see in life? If you read the news much or watch the TV or listen to the radio much, then you see the bad, the negative, the challenges. The world's going to hell in a handbasket. Our young people are crazy. Our schools are terrible. Our political system is awful. If that's what you want to see, that's what you're going to see. But what if you wanted to see the good, the positive, the opportunities? What if you said to yourself, God is still on his throne. God is still good. God is still powerful. God still answers prayer. How do you want to live? Miserable? Worried? It's up to you. It's not about your circumstance. It's about your filter. It's about your frame. You get to decide the meaning of things that happen to you. And my suggestion is that you let Jesus help you decide. Instead of being a prisoner to the stronghold of lies that Satan has put into your mind, my mind, take those thoughts captive and replace them with the truth of God's Word. How many of you thought 2021 and part of 2020 was just a terrible, terrible time? Well, when I look back on that, there were some changes here at the church that were good things. This past Sunday when we couldn't have church, we had like 90-some devices, close to 100 devices watching Facebook Live. Well, if there were just 2 people per device, that's close to 200 people just watching Cindy and Justin. Well, they watched Cindy, and then they went down to about 50 when Justin came on. I'm kidding. Sometime during the beginning of the pandemic, somebody said, well, you need to do online stuff. And so we started a devotion that on Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. And that devotion's been going now for almost 2 years, every day. Sometimes there's near 50 people just listening to that devotion. And if whoever's doing it would shut up after about 10 minutes, there'd probably be more people than that. What makes me really mad is when Shelby Jean gets on and then it blows it up. There are more people watch than any other time. But here's the thing. When you really look at it, our church is growing now. We're baptizing people more often now than we have in a long time. We're helping people who are in need financially. God is using our church in a great way, but we just want to talk about the bad things that have happened. Do you really believe Romans 8:28? Romans 8:28 says that God causes all things to work together for good to those who love him and who are called according to his purpose. Do you really believe that? Now, it doesn't say everything that happens to you is going to be good, but it does say that God can turn it to good. Write that verse down and read it. Reject unhealthy default frames. And when you're reframing, actively interpret your circumstance. Don't just passively accept them the way you think they are. Do not try to understand God through your circumstances, but interpret your circumstance through the goodness of God. What did Paul say? What's happened to me actually served to advance the gospel. You can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you frame it.